welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Isaiah 38 and Revelation chapter 4. Now, in Isaiah 38, the good King Hezekiah gets a message from Isaiah the prophet that you're going to die. Your time has come to an end. Put your household in order. Well, he wasn't ready to die, and so he weeps and he wails and he goes before God and he says, please, no, my time's not done. So God says, okay, I'll give you 15 more years, plus I'll sort out the Assyrians. Now you might ask the question, well, why did God say he was going to die when he knew he wasn't going to die? Well, the reality is he was going to die. It was just 15 years later. And, the point of this matter is prayer really matters. It does. And then God said, in addition to that, I'm going to give you a sign that you're going to live. I'm going to move the shadow back 10 steps on Ahaz's stairwell. So that's a beautiful sign, because like moving the shadow 10 spaces is showing you you're going to get time back. And you might ask, well, how did he do that? Like, did he stop the world spinning? Well, no, that could happen anyway, couldn't it? It could change the way you see it. Ahaz saw it. It could be refracting rays. Who knows? I mean, God created the universe, so he can move a shadow, which is what he did. Anyway, so the end of this chapter is King Hezekiah really paying an incredible tribute, saying, God, you spared my life. And it is a great, great chapter. Now, in Revelation chapter 4, John is invited up into heaven. A door's open and the voice speaking to him says, look in here and see what must take place. There are some things that are not up to debate. They must happen. The enemies of God must be destroyed. His people must worship him. We can't negotiate these things. So what's he looking at? He's looking at the throne room, and it's described as a kaleidoscope of color. There's an emeralds, the emeralds around, there's rainbows over him, there's splashes of color. Why? Well, God's the creator. John 8 says Jesus is the light of the world. It shouldn't surprise us. That is just dazzlingly bright. He's not invited into a dentist room. Sorry, dentists. The throne room doesn't look like that. It's not neon lights. No. This is incredible, with flashes of lightning, peals of thunder, and there's someone sitting on the throne. Now that throne is mentioned 135 times in the Old Testament, 61 times in the New, and 45 of those times are in the book of Revelation. This throne room appears 17 out of the 22 chapters in the book of Revelation. It's central. Why? It's describing God's rule, his governance, his reign, his superiority over everything that's busy happening. And you lose sight of the throne room. You lose all perspective. I've got a lounge just back there, and off the lounge there's our dining room. We've got this massive dining room table. Now, Sue and I have our regular seats. Our family has told us that when we are in Cape Town and our seats are vacated, it's like they've lost perspective. It's like, it's just not the same. And so this is like, before we look at the future, before we look at all the uncertainty and all the calamity that's coming, there's one thing that's certain. God is on his throne. Now, when your marriage is in trouble, you lose perspective if you're not around the throne. If your business is in trouble, you're going to lose your bearings unless you gather that business around the throne. There's great application and implication for us here. He looks at the throne, and then he sees some other thrones around those thrones, 24 to be exact. There's a young guy called Luke who's been asking me questions about the book of various books of the Bible, and he says, who's on those thrones and why are they there? Well, the Bible actually doesn't tell us their names. Jesus was speaking to Peter once, and Peter said, look, we've given up everything to follow you. And Jesus said this, you will be seated with me on 12 thrones in heaven. And so maybe they are those thrones, maybe they are other thrones. And then possibly others have surmised the rulers of the tribes of Israel. So you've got Old Testament and New Testament leaders around the throne of heaven. We don't know. But all we know is that they're little thrones. They've got like the front row seats as the ruler of the cosmos, God himself, has everything in his hands. Now, there are other actors as well, support actors. They're these angelic beings that look like, one looks like a lion, other like an ox, other like a man, other like a flying eagle, reminiscent of what Ezekiel saw. They've got eyes all over them, they've got wings, and you've got to use your imagination here. Much of this is picture language describing these angelic beings that are worshiping God 24/7. We designed to worship God, not to worship ourselves. To sing. We're designed for singing, aren't we? You get in the motor car, what's the first thing you do? You turn on the radio. A baby's crying. What's the first thing a mother does? Wants to sing to it. We're designed for that. And so God calls us not only to gather around his throne, but to worship him. And so we call together with all the angels as we hurtle towards the end of the age to worship God with everything that's inside of us. Talking about singing, this is the way this chapter ends. All the creatures, all the elders never stop singing, holy, 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 worthy is he who was, who is, and who is to come. There's a hint at the end of this chapter that Jesus is returning to do something spectacular on earth.